the harshest, most desolate, and least explored continent on the planet. A frozen desert, a land of mysteries that has been home to countless legends throughout history, repeatedly claiming the lives of those who attempted to discover it. Antarctica's existence is no longer a secret. It lies at the bottom of our world, waiting to be discovered. But there's a problem. You are forbidden to go there. You are not even allowed to roam freely. Why? Why do countries try to keep this ice-covered continent hidden from view like a secret treasure? Or are there truths they don't want anyone to know except for a select few? Today we're embarking on a journey to the frozen south of our world. We'll try to unravel the stories told about Antarctica and the truths behind them. By the end of this journey, many of your questions will be answered. While new ones waiting to be solved will emerge. In the year 100 AD, we encounter an extraordinary Greek sage, Claudius Ptolemy, an astronomer, mathematician, geographer, and philosopher. While satisfying his thirst for knowledge in Alexandria's famous library, he left us dozens of valuable pieces of information. But he has a very interesting claim relevant to our topic today. Ptolemy was the first person in history to mention a massive landmass in the southern hemisphere. In his work Geography, he refers to this continent as Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern lands. So how could this man make such an assumption? How could he mention the South Pole, which no one even knew existed when knowledge about the world's continents was so limited at the time? Answer: science. Ptolemy had adopted Aristotle's claim, made 400 years earlier, that the world was round, and he believed that for a round world to remain in balance, there had to be significant weights at its northern and southern ends. Considering that most of the known world's landmass was in the north, he claimed that there must also be a large landmass in the south. He called this the theory of equilibrium. This idea of mysterious, unknown southern lands became a legend and a goal over the centuries. European sailors in particular competed to be the first to discover it. In 1511, Piri Reis, the great navigator of the Ottoman Empire, shook the world with an extremely mysterious map. The famous and mysterious map showing Antarctica, whose existence was unknown at the time, in its pre-glacial state. While conducting his research in 1513, Piri Reis presented a comprehensive map to the Sultan of the time, Yavuz Sultan Selim. It was a map that even contained information about the American continents. Today, you know this as the famous Piri Reis map. However, what you see is actually a small part of a larger map, but beneath the map we see another interesting landmass. We know today that Antarctica is located there. But how could Piri Reis have drawn this mysterious continent, which at the time was only a legend? Especially without the ice sheet that is said to have existed there for millions of years. Impossible, right? You might think that behind this must be information from the astral world or drawings left behind by an ancient advanced civilization. That's normal, because for years such claims have been made to add mystery to the subject. But the truth is much simpler. Piri Reis did not obtain information from aliens, lost civilizations, or beings from the astral world when he created his map. As he clearly states in his book, he only compiled information he received from previous sailors. So how did this man map Antarctica? Those who say no one could have discovered it back then are mistaken. Who told you it was Antarctica? Internet forums, mysterious videos, right? In reality, the area on the map represents Patagonia and Tierra del Fuego, the southernmost regions of South America. Since the continent had not yet been fully explored, Reis made a mapping error and extended the unexplored parts of the region downwards on his map. When the map was corrected using modern computer modeling, we now know how well the drawing aligns with South America's eastern coastline. So there's no mystery in Reis's map, as you might have thought. The Orontius Finaeus map, published in 1531, complicates matters somewhat, because once again we see a southern continent that clearly resembles Antarctica and is not covered in ice. French mathematician, astronomer, and cartographer Orontius stated that he drew on the notes and drawings of Ptolemy, Christopher Columbus, and Amerigo Vespucci when preparing his world map in 1531. The legend of the mysterious southern land has existed since Greek times. That's why you often see a continent at the southern tip on such old world maps. Even if it wasn't discovered, this phenomenon was adopted as a basic model by many European cartographers. But there's an interesting point here. The shape of the continent on Fine's map closely resembles the appearance of Antarctica after humanity mapped its ice-free state with high technology in the 1990s. This is still a matter of debate. Some researchers say Fine actually drew the Australian continent. This is highly unlikely, as European explorers discovered Australia nearly 100 years after Fine. With this possibility ruled out, we are left with two possibilities. Fine took the long cliched issue of the lost southern continent, drew a continent from his imagination, and coincidentally made it resemble today's ice-free Antarctica. Or perhaps Fine, impossible as it may seem, was actually able to draw Antarctica before it was covered in ice. Charles Hapgood, born in 1904, studied history at Harvard University and later became a professor of history. Despite being a history professor, Hapgood had two other major areas of interest: ancient maps and geology. He spent years trying to solve the mystery of the lost southern continent, visible on centuries-old maps. He produced an interesting theory by combing through hundreds of pieces of information, from ancient Greek myths to the map of Orontius Finaeus. According to Hapgood, the global cartography techniques used in these ancient maps were far ahead of their time. In particular, they had drawn the coastlines of the continent he believed to be Antarctica extremely well. Hapgood combined this and similar data with historical myths to claim that an advanced civilization that existed before the Ice Age left certain techniques as a legacy to humanity. Yes, the theory of a civilization that existed before the flood, you know. This civilization had advanced seafaring techniques, and its homeland was the mysterious southern lands targeted by Orontius Finaeus and the Greeks. But there was one difference. According to Hapgood, the frozen continent, known in the modern world as Antarctica, did not exist there at that time. It was located in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, in a much milder and more habitable place, and was home to a highly advanced civilization. After the events of the Younger Dryas period, known as the Flood, which occurred 12,000 years ago, the massive continent drifted to the southern tip of the present-day world and became covered in ice. Continental drift? Other academics at the time dismissed Hapgood's claim as nonsense. How could massive continents move? They said it was scientifically impossible and absurd. But what they didn't know was that continents were constantly moving. Alfred Wegener first proposed the theory of continental drift in 1912. But at the time, the scientific community dismissed this claim as nonsense. Later, in the 1950s, with the ocean floor mapping project, cracks in the ocean floor were noticed over the past decades. In 1968, the theory of plate tectonics was formulated by Robert Parker and Dan McKenzie. And in the 1970s, GPS technology proved that the continents really do move very slowly. Science is variable, friends. It is not fixed. In 1912, Wegener was ridiculed by his colleagues, but in the 1970s he was proven right. However, there's a difference between continental plate tectonics and Hapgood's claim. Continents move only in very, very small amounts each year. Therefore, it takes millions of years before we begin to see changes in the world's continental shapes. But according to Hapgood, the massive Antarctic continent, as large as North America, suddenly shifted to the South Pole Circle. This is a truly bold claim. After centuries of legends, the idea of mysterious southern lost lands was finally proven in 1820 by the Russian Imperial Navy. The Antarctic continent was officially discovered by humans. From this day forward, countries lined up to explore this region with the world's most challenging climate conditions. The first comprehensive exploration was carried out by Admiral Byrd between 1928 and 1930. But the Americans weren't the only country researching the mysterious continent. The Nazis also organized expeditions to the region in 1938 and 1939. Although many stories say that the Nazis were also searching for Atlantis, they actually went there for the region's natural resources. The Nazis, preparing for war, needed large quantities of whale oil and various raw materials, and they planned to obtain them from this desolate continent. However, with the start of the World War, this supply line was cut off before it began. The only real information that adds mystery to the events is that in the final years of the war, when the Nazis realized their end was near, various military technologies, and, according to some, even Hitler himself, were smuggled from Germany to bases in Antarctica, and from there to Argentina and Chile. Of course, this is not a claim with definitive proof. Immediately after the war, the United States dispatched a large fleet of 4,000 soldiers and scientists to explore Antarctica, marking the beginning of the most comprehensive experiments the region had ever seen. The basic information given to the press is presented as testing cold weather technologies and examining the region's climatic and geological structure. But according to some, there is a much more secret side to the operation, making contact with highly civilized creatures living under kilometers of thick ice. While all this Antarctic craze was at its peak worldwide, and people were eager to go there and discover all its mysteries, the Antarctic Treaty was hastily signed in Washington in 1959 with the participation of 12 countries, and access to the continent was closed to people. People are suspicious, aren't they? The war is over, the technology exists. Why is it forbidden to go there instead of exploring it? Why can't planes fly over it? What is hidden there? Well, actually, it would be beneficial to approach the subject with a clear mind. One of the main reasons for international interest in Antarctica after America's research was actually the efforts of states to seize the regions and extremely rich resources there. Let me give a simple example. Russia's known oil reserves are 80 billion barrels. However, it is estimated that there are 50 billion barrels of oil in the Ross Sea region of Antarctica alone. During the period of major industrialization after World War II, an attack on this region could have triggered a new war between countries and, of course, destroyed natural life. For this reason, the Antarctic Treaty was signed, and it was decided that countries couldn't use the region's natural resources or conduct military activities there. So the agreement is actually a really good agreement. The people who claim that Admiral Byrd wrote these things in his diaries are actually people who wrote various books and made programs to make money during the Antarctic craze. Normally, there's no such information in the Admiral's records. The reason flights over the continent are banned is because the weather conditions in the region are extremely dangerous, and because it has a magnetic pole, it can damage electronic devices and endanger flights. It is not entirely true that civilians are not allowed in Antarctica. For scientific research, 56 countries that are part of the agreement can conduct research there with permission. If you want to go as a citizen, Antarctic tours are offered at very high prices. You can even go to some coasts. But going towards the center is prohibited. If you consider that it is around minus 80 degrees in winter and minus 20 degrees in summer, you will understand why. Certain death awaits you. The facts concerning Antarctica present a compelling narrative. This continent is indeed a fascinating region, captivating in its mysteries, particularly from a scientific perspective. It appears that as long as the ice remains, Antarctica will continue to shroud itself in enigma. A critical question arises. Could remnants of an ancient civilization lie beneath 3 to 5 kilometers of ice? This notion is a subject for legitimate discourse. During the extraordinary epoch known as the Great Flood, occurring approximately 12,000 years ago, could the continents have shifted as posited by Hapgood's theory? While this assertion may appear extreme, it is undeniably thought-provoking. Furthermore, is it conceivable that Atlantis, purported to be an island nation during that era, could have traversed southward and become encased in ice in the polar region? Current scientific consensus suggests that such a scenario is implausible, given the millennia of ice cover over the continent. However, it is essential to acknowledge that our understanding of geology remains rudimentary. Thus, dismissing these ideas as mere folly, as past scholars may have done, seems premature. Typically, the passage of time would obliterate any traces of civilization. Nature tends to erase such remnants. Yet Antarctica's frozen expanse for millions of years could imply that certain artifacts may indeed be preserved. Ultimately, such discoveries are contingent upon the potential melting of the ice across this vast landscape. Otherwise, the task of drilling through 3 to 5 kilometers of ice and conducting research in temperatures plummeting to minus 80 degrees Celsius is daunting, particularly across an expanse of 16.6 million square kilometers. Antarctica remains an exceedingly enigmatic region. As long as the ice persists, It appears that its mysteries will endure. Perhaps one day, as a consequence of global warming, revelations may emerge from beneath the thinning ice. Let's meet in the comments. We're curious about your thoughts. And remember, some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. Some knowledge should not be learned. Some names should never be spoken.